For those of you here, normally we start with a prayer or reading or something like that and go into a 10-minute silent meditation. Sometimes I do something that's a guided meditation. Tonight I'm going to do something a little different, which is I'm just going to read something from one of my books that is related to the questions that were sent out for tonight's meeting on direct experience, whatever that is. And so I'll just read this passage, and then this will take us straight into the meditation. So no gap. I'll just we'll take our places. I'll ring the gong, and I'll read the reading as a intro to the meditation. So. The title of this is called Being and Non-Being. So make yourselves comfortable. I will ring a gong, 1 to start, 2 at the end of the 10 minutes to end the meditation. And so. Being and non-being. Relative conceptual being is limited, but absolute being is beyond both being and non-being, which are only concepts. This is not just a word game, nor is it merely a spiritual platitude pointing towards something greater than our individual lives, towards that which is eternal, unborn, undying, and unchanging. It is not a philosophy. It is not itself a concept to be believed or disbelieved. It is the reality in which we exist. And this absolute being can be recognized, experienced, and known without doubt. For the purposes of thought and discussion, we can entertain concepts of being and non-being, existence and non-existence, and that's great. But when all the thoughts have run their course, we will still be no closer to the truth. When the discussion has died down, we will still have no definitive answers to the mystery of our lives. Fixated on a limited view of existence as an ego self contained within a body, we may wait for the next thought or the next discussion to arise. And with each thought and each discussion, we hope for some satisfaction, some clarity that never seems to arrive. Is there any other way? How can we recognize this absolute being? It cannot be touched by concepts and ideas, which are always bound by dualistic views. It cannot be grasped by the ego, which is itself only an idea or collection of ideas. All words go dark in the light of its presence. And yet, it is so close, so intimate and immediate. We can ignore it, but we cannot really escape it, for this absolute being is actually our own being. Instead of engaging the mind with concepts and ideas, quiet the mind and allow innate awareness to encompass everything. Within this awareness, there is no inside or outside, no being or non-being, no life or death, no self or other, no body or world. There is just being. It is like a vast emptiness, and yet 10,000 suns could not be brighter than its darkness.
So Matthew and I got to have what I thought was a great discussion, a couple of them about direct experience, time, past and future. Um, and I came up with some questions, and I was rereading them right before the meeting and realized some of them would make more sense to ask Matthew, and some of them would probably make more sense to ask uh, the people participating today. So we'll start with Matthew. And, uh, so the first one is, what is direct experience?
This is a great question. First of all, anytime I talk about any topic, this what is always the first question I like to address because so often we don't really know what we're talking about and we jump to all kinds of crazy conclusions. Like actually, Dennis and I were texting earlier about some article about AI talking about whether AI is conscious or not and so on. And I said that the issue with trying to evaluate consciousness is nobody knows what it is. So how are you going to determine whether something has it or doesn't have it if you don't even know what it is? How are you going to test it and so on? So this question, what is direct experience, is a great question. Also, I'll say, like, when I was younger, I heard, all these kinds of phrases or more read about, I was reading spiritual books and I read about see things as they truly are. And I thought, well, what could that possibly mean? Am I not seeing things as they truly are and so on? And this direct experience is just like that. It's a phrase that you hear that people speak about. And so we get the sense that somehow we're not having a direct experience, which in some ways is not true, and maybe in some ways is true. But as far as what is it with regard to what the spiritual teachings are saying, I would say it is experiencing reality itself as reality itself. And I'll put it this way, like, throughout our life, I would say, by and large, we're having what I would describe as a conceptual experience. In other words, we have this idea of what we think is going on. Like I said in the reading, that we're a soul or an ego or something in a body living through time between an imagined birth and an imagined death, and that the world is this physical thing, and we exist in it as another physical thing, somehow imbued with consciousness. So we have this whole worldview. It's all based on concepts, and it's all sort of conditioned in the mind, and we take it to be absolutely real. And so in contrast to that, this direct experience is seeing all of those conditioned views as views. In other words, as not fundamentally real. And seeing the fundamental reality that underlies everything. This probably doesn't make it any more clear, because I'm thinking back to myself, like how I would have interpreted these words, and I would just be trying to imagine, well, what is that fundamental reality? How is it different from what I'm looking at? And in some sense, it's not any different than what you're looking at. And I would say everyone is having a direct experience all the time, because what else would you be experiencing except reality itself? However, like I said, I think at least my experience was that I was living inside an imagined view of what it was. Maybe people have had this experience actually, like if you've ever believed something wholeheartedly, so much that you really saw the world that way, and then became disillusioned of that view or that belief and discarded it. It's like that, only if you discard all views and you don't replace it with any other type of view, that's the direction in which direct experience is. So it's it has no conceptual overlay. In other words, you remove all the views, all your concepts, all your ideas about what is going on, and you see plainly without any conceptual overlay. But I'd like to hear from you all about what your idea of this direct experience is, because like I said, it's so close to what the what all of these teachings are really trying to get to, that it's really difficult to describe what it is that I'm talking about. The Buddhists would say it's emptiness. To be able to recognize emptiness both in form and non-form, that's direct experience. Another way to put it would be recognizing that which is permanent, which doesn't come and go. Everything that comes and goes is transient and impermanent, and therefore not foundational or fundamental. So that which is permanent is fundamental. If you perceive that, that's direct experience. Another way to put it is, that comes up a lot in spiritual teachings, is knowing the difference between what is real and what isn't real. So normally we take a lot of things that aren't real in the sense that they're not lasting to be real or to be reality. And we ignore what is permanent, the reality itself. We just ignore it because it isn't anything in particular.
And I had asked about how does it differ from like normal experience? And I think the normal experience would be caught up in the mind and thoughts and living in that alternate reality. That's like what I was talking about as normal. That's what I think I considered normal before I had.
Yeah, I mean, to put it really simply, I would say the normal experience is you take all of these distinctions to be real. There are all these separate objects, there are all these concepts, there are all these things in the universe, and that's what reality is, and that would be the normal experience. That was that was my experience, and there is a kind of a veil, as they say, between that and the reality itself, but it isn't it's not as I imagined it anyway. It is much more well, I can't really say what it's like, because nothing changes, but except that you don't take all of the things that you see to be the ground of your being, or the ground of reality. Does anybody have any questions about this? Because I actually feel like I'm having a hard time describing this, because it's when it's put to me in such a direct question, it's like I'm trying to write a dictionary definition of it or something. And what's much more effective is to be able to point to it, or to show in which direction it is, or what in your own mind is standing in the way of seeing it. Yeah, Dennis.
Is direct experience also moments of wonder and awe during your lifetime?
Yes, I do think that when we experience moments of awe, particularly just a kind of incomprehensible indescribable, speechless kind of awe in which you're sort of dumbfounded. I would say yes. This is like the veil has thinned, and it's almost disorienting because there is there's nowhere to pin down that feeling, or to locate it, or to describe it, or to hold on to it. The second you try to hold on to a feeling like that, it will evaporate. You'll start thinking, or the minute you try to analyze it, again, it will evaporate. So I think probably everybody has had this direct experience in some sense. I've talked to many people, and some people describe when they were a child having an experience that just filled them with absolute wonder, and it was an overwhelming kind of experience, so much so that they kind of walled it off, because this direct experience, if unveiled, without reservation, will destroy your sense of being an individual person. And it will destroy your view of the world, your constructed conceptual view of what's going on. And you won't have any idea what's going on. But yeah, and that's actually another clue, when we have a view, in one way or another, we think we know what's going on. We believe our idea, whatever that idea happens to be. Sometimes we believe it, intensely. Sometimes we just believe it subtly in the back of our mind, we just hold it lightly, but in the back of our mind, we think, yeah, I know what's going on. Well, the direct experience isn't like that. You have no idea what's going on. You can't explain it. You can't describe it. You can't rationalize it.
Can't talk about it.
You can't. Well, here we are, though. But yeah, but you notice, in order to talk about it, we have to do all this kind of dancing around words and everything, because it isn't like any other thing. All of the things you can give it a name, and then people know exactly what you're talking about because we have these shared concepts and so on and so forth. So that's definitely a clue. If you think you know what's going on, that's probably not it. Yeah.
Yeah, when we talked a couple weeks ago, and I was having quiet moments, that the mind got quiet. I think I told you I had a thought come up like, this is kind of boring. It's like my mind could not just make sense of it, or, wrap my head around it. And that's since shifted. But it was funny that I just had that interpretation that the nothingness was just, I think I said, meh, kind of boring.
Yeah. I think a lot of people who are seekers on the path spend a lot of time looking in the wrong direction, because they're looking for something that's going to blow their socks off, or that's going to, something that's some incredible high that is going to be like, a peak experience, and so on. And while that's certainly possible, it isn't quite as we imagine a peak experience to be, because the peak experiences that we've had are all enjoyed by the ego in one way or another. And although you may experience a kind of bliss or awe with this direct kind of experience, it isn't really enjoyed by the ego. And as I said earlier, as soon as you start to reflect upon enjoying it or anything like that, it will evaporate, and all you will be left with is a kind of memory or a concept or an idea of what you experienced. Because the idea of the individual self will return, the dualistic world will return, the views will return, the concepts will return, and that direct experience will again be veiled. So in that sense, you can't really enjoy it. It's not for you at all. At least it's not for your ego, And so, we get, we have a conflict of interest, in our lives, because our egos want something really great. We want to get the goodie, as Alan Watts used to say. But what we're really looking for is, at least on first glance of the ego, as you said, perhaps quite boring. So boring that it might not appear to be nothing, and we'll just ignore it. We'll think, well, that can't possibly be important. It can't possibly be what I'm looking for, because it's just nothing. And we'll turn right back around and go into our views and into the ego and so on and so forth. And so that's why, some of you people who have been at some of these meetings, I often talk about considering deep sleep. That if your true nature is continuous, if you truly exist and aren't just a phenomena coming in and out of existence, if you are, as the teachings tell us, if you are the supreme reality itself fundamentally, then you never cease to exist. At least as reality, you are eternal. And so you can examine the full breadth of your experience, and this direct experience that you're looking for should be always present in every experience that you have. And so I often point toward deep sleep, to consider your deep sleep, because the ego is gone. So you can't count on the ego to enjoy it, In deep sleep, the ego disappears, the mind disappears, the world disappears. So there's nothing there. So it's the closest experience that we all are familiar with of what is being pointed to when we talk about emptiness or talk about nothing. And so just reflect on the fact that this reality exists even in deep sleep. You exist in deep sleep. Ramana used to always say, people would come to him with various questions, and he would say, "Did you have this question in deep sleep?" So he's pointing out that it's only this question is only a problem to the mind. It's not a problem to reality itself. And if you realize that you are that reality, then all these questions dissolve. They're just mind-created dilemmas. The mind creates distinctions, takes them to be real, and then says, how can I find unity? So this is why all the teachings point beyond the mind. You have to go beyond the mind. I like this. Nisargadatta Maharaj said, this is a really great quote. He said, there is no peace of mind. Mind itself is disturbance. So.
Does anybody want to say anything about that? Have any thoughts?
Yeah,
questions?
I
Yeah,
could
Mona.
comment. This is Mona, about the metaphor, I guess that has always been helpful to me is that of the mirror, whereas the mirror is whatever it's reflecting. I mean, the nature of mirrors is it could be whatever's in front of it. And that changes, that can change constantly.
Yeah, and the mirror itself has no particular image.
Yes, right.
Yeah. Yeah. I always had trouble with that metaphor. I think I'm starting to understand it more. Which is
Interesting, because it was an easy one for me to get, you
it's
know,
funny. Yeah.
if you, just consider the basic mirror, it's whatever arises.
Yeah. Yeah.
It
I
was
think
just,
what did it for me is realizing that the mirror itself doesn't have an image of its own.
yes,
It's just completely blank.
yes, right.
Yeah. And that's what and yet it's also they are one and the same. Like the image and the blankness are one and the same.
Yeah,
It's very similar to like you often hear the metaphor of the movie and the movie screen. The images are moving on the movie screen, right? And we ignore the screen itself, which also has no image of its own. So this mirror one is probably older. This is the original one, I think. The original metaphor is the mirror before movies, I guess.
Okay. This one will be more for, I'll ask the people first, and then we'll see what you say, Matthew. So if we experience life directly in the present moment, do past and future exist? Any takers?
I mean, I think that it would appear as a thought, the thought of, oh, I need to go do this, or oh, this happened to me earlier, but it's all happening here. It's just appearing like an image or something.
Yeah, I was watching the clock during the meditation, and it's just the stopwatch on my phone, and the numbers are zipping by, you know, and yet there's just complete stillness. There's no if you try to, and this actually speaks to the direct experience thing. If you try to directly experience something like time, for example, you will never pin it down. You won't what is it that you're experiencing that points to the passage of time? That isn't just a sensation or a thought, mostly thoughts. Any other thoughts on time? Who thinks the past is real?
Yeah, I would comment that it's not, um, it does exist, but only in our body mind. And it, and it's not even real in that all of our memories of that moment in the past are filtered. There's no way to know, is that really what happened? When several people are present for the same, whatever was arising, they're
Yeah.
going to have different perspectives on it. What they heard, what they saw would be a little bit different than the other person.
Yeah, it's true. Even if we even if we take the things that we have in our memory to be some version of what really happened 5 minutes ago, yesterday, and so on, they're only a kind of representation, an extremely low resolution representation as well, and highly unstable, you know. Even I think they've done studies that show like every time we remember something, we're actually re-encoding the memory or something. It can change, like our own memories can change. We remember it one way, and then the next way we remember it slightly different, and the next day we're playing a game of telephone with our own memories, you know. And so the further and further we get from the supposed event, who knows what happened, you know.
It's funny you say that because I have 8 brothers and sisters, and when we talk about something from the past that happened and we were all in the same room at the same time, you're right. It's everybody had a different experience of whatever it was that happened.
Right, right.
And
Yeah.
I've done that purposely though, gone back and had some memory and then just changed it to something I liked better. Actually, it made me feel better, you know. So
Yeah.
it's malleable.
Wasn't this a movie, Total Recall, where you could go and get your memories erased? You know? Yeah. Yeah, this is a fascinating question about time. It was actually kind of a turning point in my own life. I did this, I had this magazine, Scientific American. It was about time, you know, and the gist of it was, here's a bunch of theories about time. We don't know what it is, but here's a bunch of things that people think, you know. And I was reading through all these different theories. I thought it was very interesting, and one or two of them really kind of hit hard because they completely like twisted my mind out of how I normally thought about time. And the one that really got me, and this is interesting because it's sort of a little bit different than what we're talking about, is there is this theory or idea of block time. And in block time, all of time, the past and future, already exist now, like a spatial dimension, you know, and we're just moving through that dimension from one point to another point. But the future already exists; it's already fixed, and the past already exists as well. So you can think about it like a giant diamond or something that's completely inert, completely stable, and you're just kind of passing through it. Now, I don't think that's what's going on, but at the time, it broke my view because I really tried to wrap my head around it, really tried to imagine it, and so my normal view of what I thought time was what was really challenged by that. And then I thought, you know, I need to figure out what this is. And so I started doing my own direct inquiry into time. I started trying to see if I could directly perceive the passage of time. And I couldn't find anything. I didn't know what was going on. See, that's a clue, you know. I would some people heard me tell this story. I was sitting at my desk at work, you know, by myself, and I would like pick up a pen and move it to the other across the air, and I would watch it, and then I would put it down, and then I would just be like, what just happened, you know? Like I was trying to, and that's the kind of you know, view breaking inquiry that leads to seeing clearly. And it is also the very challenge that we face because in our view, seeing clearly means understanding what's going on. And so as soon as we start to think, I don't understand what's going on, we think we're not seeing clearly, we think we're confused, or the mind is destabilized, or we better get a grip. You know, that's what people say. Get a grip on some things, you know. And so we look for some idea to lock things down, or to ground yourself. You know, as if you could be ungrounded from reality.
So I had, as far as time and past and future, I had a easier time seeing that past doesn't exist and a harder time with future, because that's where a lot of my that's where the mind would hook me with anxieties about what if, or what can I, what can I do? How do I solve this? How do I figure it out? Um, and we've been talking recently is like there's really nothing to figure out, like there's nothing to solve. There's nothing, life isn't just unfolding. I'm the unfolding too. I'm just, things are just happening, and so um one of my questions was, if is life just unfolding and happening freely, and do we have any control over that? And if anybody wants to chime in first, I think
Yeah,
do
jump
we
yeah.
have any control over this direct experience, this moment, this unfolding as part of it? Like, do we have any say in that, or do we just think we do? What do you guys think?
That was my same response when I read that. I just reviewed my notes, and it was exactly what you said.
In terms of
Well, we don't have much control, but we often think we do.
right. We don't have much, so we have a little.
Yeah, I'd love to hear. I'd like to get my claws in that control. Trust me, I've tried.
I read a quote the other day. It said, I have great power, but little control. And I like that because I think that we do have we make choices at every moment. We decide to do something or not do something. And I think it does lead to something. Whatever that is, it changes our experience. Let's put it that way. We can change our experience either by choice or by action or by things like that. So that has then an effect on our life.
And that is true. For example, you shouldn't ignore cause and effect. For example, if you run around doing foolish things or bad things, it's gonna not lead to good things for you. And this has been. And if you doubt it, just try it, and you will quickly be set right by karmic forces at work in your life. So there is this sense that we have in which we make choices, as you say, and those choices affect what happens next, and the imagined, the future, so to speak. And but if you really examine this moment of choice, this moment of decision making, it becomes much more dubious. If you really look closely at the moment of decision, the thought just comes out of nowhere. The action just comes out of nowhere. As Alan Watts used to say, do you decide to decide? At what point do you make the decision? And so I often tell people a great practice is to examine your thoughts. How do you get out of bed in the morning? What makes that happen? It seems you just have a whole bunch of thoughts, and then at some point you're just like, okay, now I'm getting up. And it's really hard to say what actually causes the action to happen. Because prior to that, there were just a bunch of thoughts, and you had a number of thoughts that said, maybe I should get up, but you didn't get up. And then suddenly something changes and you get up. And in the very moment in which you're thinking something or doing something or deciding something, you can't possibly do anything else. And so if you see that the future is just imagined, the past is imagined, and all there is what's happening right now, where is there any room for choice? I often say this, like, ask yourself this, are you ever not in the present moment? Can you possibly not be doing what you're doing in the present moment right now? You can't. If you decide something, you can't not decide it. If you get out of bed, you can't not get out of bed. You're already doing it. So the whole idea that we have a choice or can affect the past and future is predicated on projecting a future that is real and also projecting a past that is real and imagining that we could have done other than what we did. You know, that we could have made a different decision. But how could you have made a different decision when at the moment, that was the decision you made? So if it turns out to be wrong later, you think back and said, oh, I should have chose the other thing. Well, how is that possible? How could you have done that? So the closer and closer you examine this moment of decision, the more unstable it becomes. The more you start seeing through the veil, you know, because there's nothing there. There's nothing to ground you anywhere. And
which is different than and this is just coming from old religious beliefs about preordination. I mean, not preordination, predestination or something, like everything's already been determined, so you just go along.
Right.
And that's not what you're saying.
No.
Even though the words are similar, it's not.
Yeah,
you're not saying that everything's predetermined and you just blah blah blah. It's more
right.
The choice seems real, but it isn't real.
That's the thing. You're a full participant. You can't escape the decision-making process, but you also, if you look for who is making that decision, you don't find anything. If you look for a time in which you could have done something different, you don't find any such time. And yeah, you're right. It's not what that's more like the block time thing where everything already exists the way it is. It's predestined or preordained. But it's important to see that this doesn't relieve you of responsibilities. You know, you're still a full participant in what's going on. And this is what I mean when I say, look, there is, you know, by and large, you know, what we're looking for a lot, at least what I was looking for, we're looking for some kind of out, some kind of escape, you know, where's the escape hatch of this, you know, ship that we're on? And there's no escape. There's no escape. You are the ship itself. And so you can't get off. And so even if, that's why I say when people ask, people always frame this question in terms of free will. Do we have free will or do we not have free will? And I would say this whole question is misguided because it's predicated on the idea that there are separate beings who either possess or don't possess this quality. And the mystical teachings point toward a very different understanding in which there aren't separate beings. And to address what you were asking earlier, Annie, Joel says, and I like this a lot, I think it reveals a lot, just this simple saying, He says, of, of course, there's free will, there's just no self will. Everything is unfolding freely. It's just that your ego doesn't really have a say in it, because that also is unflowing, is unfolding freely, through causal forces and all of that. It's fascinating how we can have this whole materialistic worldview in which we imagine the whole universe works like billiard balls, but then we think we have this magical ability to make decisions that is somehow disconnected from everything else that's going on. It's kind of weird. And I'm not saying that your mind is like a billiards table. I'm saying more the universe is more like your mind.
I might add too that there's this whole lineage of life that has been lived before this moment in my life by my parents, my grandparents, my great-grandparents, and all of those events that happened in their lives. I can't take personal will seriously in my own life, because everything that happened to all those other people who preceded me has contributed to whatever's arising in my mind or my life experience.
Yeah. Even if we imagine we have this, ability to make decisions, which we do in some sense, the enormity of everything that's going on is just as big, if not much bigger.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, if you really think everything is connected, you can think, look, everything is connected back to the beginning of time. Everything is affecting everything else. So, yeah. Yeah, I had this conversation once with some people over breakfast, and they were talking about the evolution, about the dinosaurs and stuff. This is like maybe just a couple months after my awakening, and I was just kind of listening to the conversation and so on, and I said, as it sort of quieted down, I said, I'm trying to remember exactly what I said, but I was like, I don't mean to sound crazy or anything, but I'm not sure about all that. My viewpoint. I have an interest in science and scientific views, and it's I think an incredibly functional way of looking at the world and understanding the world. But again, I can't say I don't know anything. To think about the dinosaurs, all we have are the thoughts in our mind about it. Is it real? Even, the gist of what I was saying was, look, I'm not even sure about 5 minutes ago. How am I going to be sure about 6 billion years ago,
It's like we were talking about the other day about the tree. If a tree falls in the woods, and nobody's there to hear it, doesn't make a sound, kind of thing. Or I was thinking about the mirror. I'm like, if the mirror, if somebody's not there to see it, is there a reflection?
Right.
So
Yeah. The and this is another thing that can challenge people's views. When you go to sleep at night, does the world still exist? Not in your experience. Your direct experience is that it disappears, it vanishes. And then a dream may appear, and you may for a time take that to be real. Then you wake up from the dream, you're like, oh, it's just a dream. But this is real, you know? So you know, yeah. I had once a dream where I woke up like that. I thought, oh, it was just a dream. And then I came out into the kitchen to make breakfast and all. I was making breakfast. And then I woke up again. You know, I was like, what? Yeah. So, you know, the spiritual teachings in a way ask us to take our actual experience very seriously, which is ironically something that we don't do. Yeah, and I was reading um, about Tibetan dream yoga a while back, and the basic gist of this practice is while dreaming, see it as reality. While awake, see it as a dream. You know, and that gets right to the heart of it. You know, in terms of challenging your view of what exactly is going on.
I was just going to ask you, Matthew, what would be a practice to carry through the day where you could like look at something without labeling or having a view of it. Well, don't you think in your dreams maybe though you're labeling in your dreams because you recognize everything?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, this is an interesting question. Like, it's not so much the labeling. I mean, trying to drop labeling is a good practice, but
Mhm.
ultimately, labeling isn't a problem. It's useful, you know. If you're thirsty, it's good to know, you know, where some water is, you know, and to be able to label it, identify it, and, you know, take a sip, you know. It's more a sense of, do you see it as real? Or is it just an image in a mirror, for example? Um, and this is why I do think this is a good practice throughout the day to practice seeing your waking life as a dream. The,
Sometimes I can practice seeing it as a movie unfolding. Like here's all the characters and here's what they're up to, and
right.
yeah.
Yeah. Any way that you can play with kind of undermining your normal view of what's going on, I think can be helpful. Yeah, the seeing things as a movie or a story that's unfolding. Um, yeah, the more you do this, the more you, for example, you might start to see. Uh, it might start to seem like what you might not be sure. For example, if you practice this, um, you know, maybe you are dreaming right now.
Mm,
Maybe you are a character in a movie. You know,
yeah.
and this you know, again, this is like it's not so much that it's directing you to believe something else. It's not aiming at trying to create a different view. It's just trying to disrupt the dominant view in the mind so that you can see more clearly without any particular view. So all of these things actually are ways of doing that. You know, for example, even like if you just throughout the day remind yourself there is no other time than now. There is no past, there is no future. There's just this moment in which I'm living, if I'm even living.
Or the inquiry question from your book I sent out, what do I know for certain?
Yeah, that's a great question, Liz, to ask oneself periodically through the day, especially if you're caught in a particular thought or something like that, to ask yourself, what do I really know for certain that I can say with absolute 100% certainty from my own direct experience, not from an idea, not from something that somebody told me, not from an explanation of how things are, not from something you read or anything. What do you really know for sure? That question alone grounds us in direct experience because we don't take anything for granted. We know, you could say, well, we know something's happening. We're having this experience, but we don't know what it is. All our ideas about what it is are wrapped up in various views. We have no idea what it is. Frankly, even the idea of life is just an idea. We don't know what that is. We don't know what consciousness is. We could all be dead. And we're in some kind of, bardo or afterlife. We don't really know.
So if we know, though, I mean, or experience ourselves in through our five senses, or however many senses you may have, in addition. So that seems like just narrowing it down to simply that, like, this is what I'm feeling. I mean, if you take it out of the head, like a lot of times it's not about thinking so much as feeling or experiencing through the body, which seems like I don't know if it's more reliable or not, but if it's more direct in the moment anyway. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, in Buddhism, I think they count six senses because they count the mind as a kind of sense field. So there's like thought, perception, basically. It kind of makes sense actually when you think about it. We have these different kind of fields. You can reduce them all, I think, to thought. We tend to think thought is just like a verbalization of an idea. But I would say you can expand the idea of thought to include verbal and nonverbal ideas, feelings, sensations. Like when you feel something, like right now, allow your attention to go to your seat on the chair, and you can feel your body resting on the chair, right? Everybody can feel that. Where is that sensation happening? Isn't it happening in the same space that thoughts happen? there's no right answer. I'm just in general, I'm just trying to encourage you to think of things differently than the way you normally think about them. The five senses is something we've been told. Are there five senses? Do we know that? What are they? Could there be more senses that we don't know about, that we weren't told about? Are there aggregate senses, or some people have this phenomenon of synesthesia, that they can see sounds, or I don't know. It's interesting. I have this thing where I can taste smells. And for most of my life, I thought this was completely normal. It didn't, you know, uh, until, I lived in the Midwest and people are always spraying bug spray everywhere. And I was like, like, how can you do that? It's terrible. It's so awful and everything. And eventually I realized other people weren't experiencing what I was experiencing. Because I tasted it. It was like somebody had sprayed it in my mouth. So yeah. So I don't know. Yeah, senses is an interesting thing. I would say, um, if you sit in meditation, go through the five senses, and ask yourself, where is it happening? Where is the sensation?
Sound was the one that really got me confused, like, wait, is the bird, if I close my eyes, I'm like, what is it over there? Is it in here? Like, I couldn't, the line, there was no line, right? Like, I couldn't
Yeah.
find it.
That's a really classic example, by the way, hearing a bird or something like that. I think there's a famous example of like a Zen example of somebody hearing like a talk of wood or something like that. But yeah, when you realize everything, simply put, in the most simple possible terms, we could say, for example, everything is going on in your mind. Everything that you're experiencing is your mind. You're never experiencing something that isn't your mind. Every sensation that you feel, every thought that you have, every sight that you see, it's all mind. And sometimes people will say, like, for example, if you say this, will say, well, does that mean everything is just in my head and so on? This leads to people to an idea of solipsism, that everything's just happening in your head, and all you can really know is what's going on in your own mind, and that you're limited to that. And this is a complete opposite of what the spiritual teachings are saying, because solipsism assumes that you have an individual mind, and it assumes that you have a head, and you're like trapped in it, like a prison. And you're thinking, oh, there's a real world out there, but I'm just trapped in this prison of my mind. That's terrible. That's that's a terrible, like a nightmarish view of experience. But it's a place to start, to think, look, everything that I'm experiencing is my mind. The reason it's a good place to start is because it is consistent with what is the predominant worldview, which is that we have minds, and that the mind perceives an external world, and it creates a picture of that world in it, and that's how we navigate the world. And all it's pointing out is just the first step to realize that everything that you're experiencing is your mind, including everything you're looking at, everything that you hear, all your thoughts, all your sensations, everything. Now, the next step is to consider the fact that your mind and your head and your body are also things that you are experiencing. So that's also happening in your mind. You know, so you end up in this kind of paradoxical situation where there's no inside or outside. You know, the world is in your mind, but your mind is something that's in the world. You ever seen this symbol of the Ouroboros, the snake that eats its own tail? It's exactly like that. The perception, you know, we think about perception as like there's a world out there, various sense phenomena come in through the sense organs, you know, and hit you know, the mind, the backstop of the mind, and that's where we create the image. But actually it is there's no backstop. It's more continuous. Because your mind is something that's grown out of the world, that's come out of the world. It appears in the world. But the world is something that appears in the mind, you know, and if you can wrap your mind around that, you'll you know you will lose track of what is inside and outside. And I would add, this dividing line between what we think is inside and outside, that's what we call the ego. Everything on this side of the dividing line, we say that's me, and everything on that side of the dividing line, we say that's the world, that's others, that's not me.
And I think it was in your first book, there was some prompt in there to locate the mind, to find the mind. And, you know, I was like, oh yeah, it's in my brain, you know? And then I was like, wait a minute. But where I couldn't, and then I came up with, I just couldn't find it anywhere.
Yeah, it's everywhere. There's no, your mind is everywhere. Everything, everywhere you look is your mind. I
do have a question though about why, how do I phrase it? Like what is up with the like personal, there's no other way to word it, but personal experience with the mind, like the thoughts that appear out of nowhere that I hear, I'm assuming, I don't know, it might be different than somebody else or some like so what is up with the personal like I don't know, I'm just assuming that might be different, but I don't, what's that, I can't quite get the
yeah, you know,
experience.
yeah, my sense is that this cognitive dissonance of trying to make sense of that is a result of trying to mix views with no view. You know, I'm not trying to give you a view. I don't have an explanation for you, you know, so there's going to be a certain level at which I say, I don't know, you know, it's what's happening, you know. Ask yourself this, are there, you know, you mentioned, you know, you have personal thoughts, presumably they're different than my thoughts. Are there, you know, if you look in and can't find yourself, when you look out, you assume there are others. There are no others. You know, if you look inward and can't find any individual self other than reality itself, or other than the one mind, you know, if you think everything is mind, whatever you call it, there's one reality. And if there's one reality and you are that, everyone else is that also. As soon as you start to think they're my thoughts, that's cutting yourself off from the rest of the world already. See, so you start to create this self and other kind of view.
It's like the line of the ego that you just mentioned, like the line of the ego, like the you
Yeah.
had mentioned
Yes,
before.
you're recreating that line and say everything in here, these thoughts that I'm thinking, they're mine, and everything out there is not mine, so I don't know anything about it, you know.
So nuanced sometimes.
If like I said earlier, if you take this line away, you don't know what's going on. People appear as if in a dream. When you're in a dream, are the people who appear in your dream real? They may tell you things that surprise you. They may do things that shock you. Are they real in the dream? Are you the person when you have a body in your dream? Is that body real? And when thoughts occur to you in your dream, are those thoughts your thoughts? I don't know.
Would we're almost out of time. I don't know if anybody else would like to comment or ask a question. We have a few more minutes.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I'll just say that, this discussion started with this idea of direct experience. What is it? And a lot of what we talked about, I think, was trying to challenge our conditioned views of what's going on. And I think that there's good reason for that. I think that is the direction of the teachings. I think it is the direction that meditation practice takes in examining our direct experience. In other words, looking at what is our actual experience and taking that seriously, rather than just believing something that we've been told or some view that we happen to hold, even though it may not actually be our direct experience. And I'll add, I would like to reiterate what I said at the beginning is that fundamentally, we're all always having a direct experience, whether we know it or not. We are not separate from reality itself. And so we are having that direct experience. Whatever we're experiencing is reality. How could it not be? And so, the process of practice is just one of clarification, not of finding or getting any kind of new view. It's just clarifying existing views. All right. Well,
Yeah, thank you, everybody.
yeah, thank you all. It's great seeing everybody. We usually end with a little blessing. So, may you all and all people find happiness, true peace, and true clarity. Yeah. Great seeing you. Hope to see you all next month. In the meantime, I don't know what the schedule is, but there are things going on at Center for Sacred Sciences. And if you're interested in that, you can look on their website at their calendar. They generally have a talk every Sunday at 11. And I might see you there.